One of these days I was watching some games, and after molding a little bit about Malians and their infinite food income, their invisible units, and their cavalry that is strong against infantry, and their poison arrows. Poison arrows. Did something like this actually exist in real life? Poison usually requires a certain amount of time to take effect, to do anything. And in warfare, where a weapon that can stop your opponent, your enemy, on the spot is usually the first choice, how viable was actually poison and poison arrows? So I started to dig a little bit into it, and in Age of Empires 4, the Malians have a technology called poisoned arrows, and once it's researched, their archers coat their arrows with poison, causing enemies to lose health over time. They also have the Mansa Javelineers, units that can be produced out of the Castle Age landmark Farimba Garrison. These units also do poison damage, but with javelins instead of arrows. Did medieval warriors really use poison arrows? And biologically, what would poison actually do inside the human body? Today, we are going to take a look into the history and the science behind poison arrows. Invented thousands of years ago, the bow was one of the most ingenious inventions of humankind. Rust, one of the greatest prehistoric researchers, concluded that humans may have known the bow for more than 150,000 years. But when the destructive power of arrows and spears was not enough, humans started to combine the power or the effects of projectiles and poison. And this also goes way back. And there are accounts of ancient peoples such as the Romans using plant-based poisons such as yew extracts to cover their weapons. The study of poison and how they affect the body is called toxicology. But what is really fascinating is where that word comes from. Its origins are actually linked to archery. In ancient Greek, the word toxon means bow, and from it came toxikon, which refers to a poison to be applied to the arrow. So originally, something toxic literally means something for the bow and arrow. And archery in Greek is toxovolia. Do you see the connection there? And there's a fun connection in the game itself too. Byzantine archers sometimes say toxotes, which simply means archer in Greek.
Toxotis έτοιμος.
You might also recognize that name from Age of Mythology, where the archers of the Greek are called toxotes. The art of weaponizing nature brought many advantages to hunting and warfare. Small and otherwise fragile arrows would now kill enemies and large animals, even if the wound itself is small. It looks like it's nothing. And of course, less arrows would be needed to achieve the same effect or better. Still, in antiquity, the use of poison was seen as dishonorable. Greek and Roman warfare had strong ideals about open combat and skill and bravery, while using poison was often seen as deceptive, cowardly, and even unmanly. Homer even portrays in the Odyssey how poison arrows were immoral and dangerous and not heroic. In medieval Europe, warfare was influenced by chivalric ideals, and knights were expected to fight openly, face to face really. The Strasbourg Agreement, signed in 1675 between Italy and France, even establishes the prohibition of poisoned or toxic projectiles in warfare. This was not universal, however. In Asia, Americas, and Africa, poison was an efficient hunting tool. But today we know that nowhere else on Earth was poison used as much as it was used in Africa. There are many folk legends about the discovery of poison effects, but the most plausible explanation is during gathering by humans or animals, the deadly effect of plants or fruits or berries would become evident. And even today, many indigenous people, they recognize the effects of plants and fruits and berries by observing if nearby or beneath it there are dead animals and dead birds, for example, because that would indicate that the plant is toxic. The Mali Empire itself is not well documented using poison arrows, but many African cultures did. And even nowadays, there are large regions in Africa where poison arrows remain an everyday weapon, very useful in hunting. The poison itself was not placed directly on the metal tip, but rather between the point and the beginning of the shaft. In many poison makers, they would even add other ingredients to increase the potency of the poison. And these may include snake heads or lizards, insects, frogs. It even starts to sound like a potion, doesn't it? And even though these additives, they wouldn't increase the toxicity of a poison per se, they would for sure promote infection on the wound and therefore increasing the efficacy of that poison. The types of poison used in the past in Africa and nowadays, they're still fundamentally the same. They are mostly plant-based heart poisons, in contrast with the curare in South America that would paralyze muscles. In Central and West Africa, a famous poison used is the calabar bean. Its seeds contain the extremely toxic physostigmine, which interestingly acts as an antidote to the curare poison that we see in South America. So it reverses this muscle paralyzing effect. And I was wondering, should other civilizations in Age of Empires 4 also have poison arrows in their arsenal? For the Abbasid, there is no clear documentation that they were using poison arrows in warfare, but instead there are medieval Arabic texts explaining how to treat poisoned arrows, including arrows poisoned with the Indian aconite. For the Byzantines, we can also find reports and texts about the poison arrow and how to protect oneself or treat these kinds of wounds. For example, we can see in this Byzantine military manual from the 10th century a few sections about how to coat arrows with poison and how to prepare it, and even another section about how to make soldiers immune to poison drugs. And that method included feeding the soldiers with nuts and figs to protect them from the poison. I'm not sure how efficient that was though. And regarding China, poison arrows have been used for at least 2,500 years by the Han and other peoples in various parts of China. And what we see the most here is the use of aconite for hunting. There are reports of early military use of these poison arrows in China back in the year 75, and it would explain how these wounds, they would just fester, and their opponents would make believe that there was some magic involved, that these arrows had some supernatural power, and the opponents would just surrender. In any case, due to the fact of the multiple reports I found about the use of poison arrows in China, I think we can conclude that they were used in military context in ancient China. Now imagine that in the game. How exciting that would be. Imagine if we had poisoned Tsugnus, for example. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? Now, we mentioned aconite and how it was known and used by other civilizations, and aconitum actually grew around the borders of the Indian subcontinent, but there are no reports, no evidence that the Delhi Sultanate used that as in warfare at all. There are some reports of, for example, poisoned tusks of elephants being used in warfare, but those reports are highly influenced by folklore or just like pop culture, honestly, romanticism. So it's not really reliable. For the other civilizations, they are really, if there are any stories, they're just stories really. They are mostly influenced by myths or folklore, so I'm not gonna go into that. But if you know any stories or something you want to share with us about where you come from, feel free to do it in the comments. Just let us know if poison was used where you come from and you know something about it. That would be really nice. Okay, so now we have checked who and where poison arrows or poison weaponry was used, but how does it affect the body? There are different types of toxins found in poisons. Neurotoxins, for example, they affect the nervous system, but you don't have to be nervous. Even though a human's nervous system is comprised of 86 million neurons, if you have been watching up to this point, maybe you even have more than that, because clearly you are a very smart viewer. Neurons receive and send signals using neurotransmitters. They are secreted by a neuron and affect another neuron, or a gland, or a muscle cell by binding to receptors that are present in the cell membrane. And the neurotoxins, they affect how these signals are transmitted between neurons and cells, or neurons, and so on. And depending on the neurotoxin, it can block signals, causing paralysis because there's no communication between the cells, or it can overstimulate them, causing seizures and loss of control, literally. And when that happens, the funny thing is the animal or the person affected, they are conscious the entire time. One of the most well-known neurotoxins is the curare poison that we mentioned before, which can be extracted from plants native to South America. Curare was known as flying death, and it was used by indigenous people for hunting with arrows or darts. And the animal hit with curare would die of asphyxiation due to the paralysis of the respiratory muscles. Interestingly, this poison was used in anesthesia between the 50s and the 70s. Pretty recent if you ask me. In early 1800s, a scientist injected curare to the legs of a few different donkeys. That's science for you back then, by the way. And they found out that the donkey that had a pump of air in there attached to its lungs didn't die. And from there onwards, curare was used to cure convulsions, for example. But its main active ingredient was only extracted in 1935, and it was called tubocurarine. And chemically, it's an alkaloid, a compound containing nitrogen that can affect our bodies, just like morphine or caffeine. Tubocurarine, however, cannot be absorbed through the digestive system. It has to go into the bloodstream. And how does it block? How does it cause paralysis? Well, once in the bloodstream, it interrupts the binding of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter that is responsible to activate the muscle cells once they bind to it. And poison frogs were also used in South America to extract this type of neurotoxin. The golden poison frog, for example, which is endemic from Colombia, is considered the most poisonous animal species on the planet. They produce batrachotoxin, toxin, one of the most powerful natural poisons known to man. And this toxin would be extracted either by hitting the frogs or by rubbing the darts on their skin. And once a dart hits an animal or a human, it would cause immediate cardiac arrest and paralysis. Imagine losing a fight because of a frog. Should we add frogs to Age of Empires 4? But this is a lot of South America. I want to talk about the neurotoxin that we mentioned before, aconite. Aconite's main active ingredient is aconitine. This toxin binds to ion channels on the membrane that are responsible of generating electrical signals, forcing them to stay open. And as a result, these tiny gates, they don't work properly anymore. First, causing overstimulation, many signals being sent without non-stop. And eventually it leads to failure of normal muscle and nerve functions. Imagine you work in a sorting center, and every time a hatch opens, you receive a package, You read what it's there and you send it to the proper place. Now imagine that hatch breaks and it's open forever, and packages start to pour out on top of you. They're just pouring, coming non-stop. At first, what you're gonna do, you're gonna try to keep up. You're gonna get a package, you're gonna try to read as fast as possible and just send to the right direction where it should go. But eventually, you're just gonna get overwhelmed and too exhausted to continue. You're just gonna stop and quit, literally. And that's exactly what aconite does. It just breaks that hatch. There are also cardiotoxins that target the heart cells. There are hemotoxins that target blood cells, and cytotoxins that target really any cell. Cardiotoxins literally mess up the ions balance in the heart, leading to irregular heartbeats and eventually heart failure. Hemotoxins destroy blood cells, decreasing the amount of oxygen being transported in the body, which leads to, for example, organ damage. And more than that, it can damage blood vessels, which leads to internal bleeding. While cytotoxins simply target any cells, they just kill anything around them, which leads to gangrene. But these toxins are not really common at all. They are mostly toxins found in spiders and snakes, but they were not really used in warfare or in hunting by humans. And way more than that, cytotoxins and hemotoxins, they take hours, if not days, to kill, making them less efficient for hunting or in the battlefield. And in comparison, neurotoxins can kill in minutes or seconds, besides leading to complete paralysis of the victim. In summary, what we can verify is that aconite, a neurotoxin, was used in warfare in Asia. And plant-based poisons with cardiotoxins were more common in Africa. Now, the biggest problem with poison is production and quantity. Imagine being the guy responsible for poisoning thousands of arrows before a battle. Yeah, that's a full-time job, isn't it? Extracting toxins would be extremely time-consuming. And on top of all that, the poison would just lose its potency over time. Especially if you stop to think about in medieval times how they did not have fridges or anything like that. And because of all that, if you take everything into account, poison projectiles were produced on demand to be used quickly and mostly for hunting. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I tried to do something new here. Please let me know in the comments if you like this type of content, going more to the science side of the game. It's something that I'm just, starting to explore, so I would love any feedback. If you think was too superficial, you want to see more science deep details, or if you think that's enough level of scientific terms and, explanations. So feel free to let me know in the comments, and like the video if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one, of course, as always. Bye bye!